social change. I'm Bobby Whiteyear, President and CEO of United Way of Southwestern Pennsylvania. I can't think of a more appropriate way to recognize and celebrate the life and legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. than to put his principles of service and empathy into practice within our own families. We think of Dr. King as someone whose life changed the world, and it certainly did. More than 50 years after his death, his words and teachings carry great relevance. But no matter how far we've come as a society to create racial equity, we are still far from that beautiful mountaintop that he imagined. At United Way, we reaffirm our commitment to racial justice, especially when it comes to children and students who are growing up in a very difficult time. In Dr. King's day, he communicated from the pulpit. And when he communicated to larger audiences, it was through a newer medium of television. I wonder how his message of peace and hope would translate in our world of Twitter, Facebook, and TikTok. Social media has changed just about every part of our society, sometimes for the better, when it connects us with ideas and people and opportunities that we otherwise wouldn't have. But especially as we've seen this past year, social media also has some unintended, perhaps intended consequences, and it puts immense pressure on young people. United Way is passionate about making change in the lives of our most vulnerable neighbors. And one thing is certain, social media can play a significant role in how we all go about affecting change and impacting the lives of others. The question is, how do we make social media a tool for positive change, especially when it comes to issues of racial justice and multicultural understanding? That's why I'm thrilled to introduce and welcome Ms. Candi Castleberry. Candi is Vice President of Diversity Partnership Strategy and Engagement at Twitter. She is also the founder of the award-winning Dignity and Respect campaign, which has helped organizations create more inclusive work environments. Candi is an experienced diversity and inclusion leader, and her bolt-on to built-in model is featured in her chapter of Crossing the Divide, Intergroup Leadership in a World of Difference. She has developed successful strategies and initiatives in technology, communications, and healthcare, including at Xerox, Sun Microsystems, Motorola, and UPMC. Candi is a graduate of UC Berkeley, and she received her MBA from Pepperdine, and she completed the Stanford Executive Human Resources Program. Candi also has served as an adjunct professor at Carnegie Mellon University. Please join me in welcoming Candi Castleberry. Candi, over to you.
Good morning. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Hold on. Can you see my screen? Yes?
Yes.
Okay. Well, good morning, Pittsburgh. There is not a place I'd rather be if I weren't in this space where I'm sitting right now than to be in Pittsburgh, with the exception of the weather. I can tell you that once I said from a stage in Pittsburgh that the only thing that I would love more about doing my job was to do my job from Pittsburgh. And the good news that I can share is that working for Twitter, you can work from anywhere. So we may as well consider ourselves having a small little piece of Twitter sitting in Pittsburgh, with me doing the work that I do and the championship that you will see as we will launch a new initiative that will include Pittsburgh in the coming months. So thank you for having me this morning. I can tell you also that it is a humbling conversation to talk about social media as a tool for change, recognizing that, quite frankly, as was just suggested, that social media can be used for good, and social media can also sadly cause harm. So what I would ask you to think about as the context, as the backdrop, is that social media is really showing us who humans are in the world. It just allows people to do it in ways that perhaps are less risky for them as humans than doing it in person. So we should not be surprised, or we should not act as though the concerns that are showing up in social media are not, quite frankly, in our existing communities, perhaps in our neighborhoods, and perhaps in our schools, and hopefully not in our homes, but quite frankly, we're all humans. So these concerns exist everywhere. So today I'm going to talk about social media as a tool for change, but I'd like to give some context first, because I think that before you get started promoting social change, I think there's a couple of things that you should take, one, into consideration, and two, that you should, quite frankly, think about as social media and your media that you post on social media is also a reflection of you. So I'd like to start by distinguishing me, or you, and your passion, right? So I'm going to ask you first, if you wouldn't mind, putting a description of yourself in the chat in just a second. So I want you to start thinking about this. So when I think about me, in many cases, I'm going to distinguish between me and my passion. And when I think about me, this is what people see. They see my gender. I self-identify as female. My pronouns are she, her. My nationality is Black. My job title is Vice President of Diversity, Partnership, Strategy, and Engagement at Twitter. And just to put a little note on that, to distinguish what I do from the traditional work of diversity and inclusion that some of you may have known me to do, I had in most of my career, with the exception of the time that I had at UPMC, where I did both internal and external. My role at Twitter right now is focused very externally in building partnerships and relationships with organizations who advocate for misunderstood and perhaps underrepresented communities. In fact, oftentimes the communities that I work with are under-resourced. They are nonprofits. They are NGOs that are primarily focused on elevating and amplifying either the concerns of underrepresented groups and or doing the work of underrepresented groups. So when I think about my work today and this conversation we're having today, it's perfectly timed, but it also is the heaviest time to be doing this work. Because what we have known and recognized and hopefully have seen throughout this year of 2020 and as we move into 2021 is the amplification of underrepresented groups and their voices on platforms like Twitter and Facebook and IG or TikTok. And in amplifying those things, what we saw is that in many cases, what they were amplifying may have been news to some people, but have been the experiences of people who have been long underrepresented in this country. And so at a time where I am doing external partnerships, my role primarily is to partner with these organizations to amplify their voice, to amplify their work. And what I was alluding to is a program that we will launch in a number of cities to amplify the work in cities of organizations who are doing that work. And some of the people who are leading work in Pittsburgh will be included in that process. So this is what I do. So in many cases, when people see me, this is what they see, this is what they know, my gender, my nationality, and my job title. However, the important thing to highlight is that my passion is sometimes very different than the work that I do. And when you are in a position where either you're leading something or championing something, whether that's a cause or leading a body of work, when you can find an opportunity for these two things to align, it is incredibly exciting. So for me, because my passion is diversity and inclusion, I am also an activist at heart. For those of you who are old enough to remember Berkeley as an activist, they teach you how to be an activist, and corporate America teach you how to do it in a blue suit. If any of you follow me on social, you'll know that two things are very clear, that I have taken up bike riding and that I have a love for Pittsburgh. What I will also tell you is that oftentimes when people have a passion that is not equal to their roles, this is where the conflict comes. Because sometimes in their role, they can't express their passion on social media. I imagine as people who are perhaps younger than I, that the passion actually may be what you lead with versus your role. And if you're a parent watching this, your role probably has to lead versus your passion. And so when you think about these two things together, these things can't actually be separated from social media. Because whether you start as a person who is activating because you care about a cause like inclusion and diversity, or you're activating because you have a role, once you're on social, these two things will forever be associated with each other. So you must decide first who you are and what your passion is, because before you begin to activate about a particular cause or change, it's important to ensure that you understand that these two things cannot be separated. The second thing that I would tell you is that for everything that you feel strongly about, you're going to find people who have a similar passion. I can tell you that I have made new friends simply because I started posting about biking. And what I can tell you is that these people are all around the world. There are people who perhaps I've known for a long time that I didn't know were bikers. There are people who I'm meeting who are brand new, who I didn't know were bikers. And I'm meeting new people, people who share the interest that I have in bike riding. And then there are also those who have a difference of opinion. And in fact, I watched a dialogue yesterday because someone posted simply a photo and said, should I get this bike or this bike? And even though we had a similar conversation or something similar passion in mind about bike riding, this particular person didn't like the brand that this person was deciding between and decided to have a whole rant or a whole opinion in that case, right? About the brand of the bike and why this person shouldn't buy that bike. So in addition to us thinking about how we think about ourselves and our passion, we should also be prepared for the fact that there are many people, if you're on social, you already know this, that have similar opinions and those who have different. Now, I will tell you, for me, when I think about how to respond, right, to people who have a difference of opinion, I can't help but always give a plug for the context of the words dignity and respect. And the reason you keep seeing this ampersand is because I believe in the ampersand in my whole heart. I don't know, I mean, because you can see my slide, you probably, I will go off of this when we do a Q&A so that you can actually see, and I can see some of your faces. What you should know is that I believe in the ampersand literally enough to tattoo it on my body. I have two tattoos. One is an ampersand and one is a heart. The ampersand for me represents collaboration. It represents the fact that there is me and someone else. There is my opinion and someone else's opinion. And by the way, the and is how we can live productive lives. It is how we can build friendships. It is how we can build proactive and I would say purposeful relationships, is with the power of the and. And so I put this and in between the words dignity and respect, because there are going to be people, and we all know this in our lives. You don't have to go to social media to find out that there are people who are both similar and different. We can open our eyes and look around. In fact, we can sit inside of our homes and we can have a conversation at a table. We can have conversations with our friends, and we will always find someone who is similar in an opinion or in our similar demographic and background. And there are also going to be people who are always going to be different. Now, if you don't have people with a different perspective in your life, I would tell you, aside from this conversation today, I would just give a plug for making some new friends. Because in order for you to treat others and to even respond to others on social media with dignity and respect, you must also be willing to accept that other people have different perspectives. And I'm not suggesting that those perspectives have to change yours, but they should surely inform yours. And so when I think about someone coming at me on social media, and we'll talk a little bit about cancel culture in a little bit. But when I think about someone coming at me in real life or in person, the thing that is the hardest is to respond with respect in spite of someone being disrespectful to me. Now, the thing that I tell you about the response in person versus the response on social is that the response on in person is a story that often can be told by the people who were present, right? Unless it's, of course, videotaped, right? So if I have a conversation, as an example, with Wendy, who I hope you all know at the United Way, she and I can have a dialogue. And if that conversation is one that's respectful, she will walk away and have that feeling. But if it is not, she will walk away and not have that feeling of treating respect. But if I said it to her on social, not just does she know how she felt, whether it was positive experience of respect or a negative experience, the lack of respect, the whole entire world knows. Now, sometimes we believe that we can just delete a post, a tweet, a video, and perhaps no one else in the world will know it happened. Well, I am here to tell you that as soon as you pull down a post, by the way, it doesn't matter how big you are, how many followers you have. All it takes is one other person to have seen it and screenshot it, and it lives forever. And you never know when that post will reappear. That time that you decide to apply for a big job, or you're applying for school, and all of a sudden you're running for a class president, or perhaps you're running or applying for a role, your very first job, and then one day that post reappears. So I tell you that if you can just think about the context of dignity and respect before you post, before you tweet, before you do a thing that's related to social media, this is the best advice I could give you in going into the context of social media as a tool for social change. And I can't leave this slide without asking you to do what I always ask people to do, is to raise your hand if you believe you deserve dignity and respect. Now, I know that I can't see your faces, so I'm trusting that as participants in this conversation, you're willing to just participate with me. So raise your hand if you believe you deserve to be treated with dignity and respect. I imagine everyone is raising their hand. The second question that I always ask is to raise your hand if you treat everyone who you interact with dignity and respect. I mean, everyone at work, everyone at school, everyone who's on a different team than you, people who you see when you're walking down the street, people who you interact with when you buy coffee, or when you're literally having a dialogue with your parents, or your parents with you, with your children, or your siblings. When you think about the context of dignity and respect, and I ask you to raise your hand now, if you raise it to say, I treat everyone I interact with dignity and respect, most people cannot raise their hand as high as they did when they said, I want it. And some people, being honest, don't raise their hand at all because we recognize we have more work to do. And there is a group of people who, if we were in a room and you were raising your hand, someone behind you would say, I know he or she is not raising their hand. Because guess what? We all have work to do. And so if we think about our human interactions, and we know and can agree that some of us have work to do with dignity and respect, keep in mind that it doesn't get better just because we're putting it on social media. All right. So agree and disagree, right? Before we start thinking about posting, we have to think about, again, ourselves, our role, and what our passions are. We have to think about the context of thinking about how all of this applies in the world, the power of dignity and respect, and recognize that sometimes you can agree and sometimes you will disagree. But how you do that matters, because this will follow you for the rest of your life. Because once it's on social media, it's kind of like forever. All right, so let's get started. So the first thing I'd like you to do now is, in the context that I just shared, the things that I'm passionate about, I'd ask you if you wouldn't mind to start to populate the chat. So I'd ask you to put in a couple of things that are the ways are things that I would say you are passionate about, right? So if you could put a couple of those things in the chat, and the way that I will know that you are participating is because we'll see these things in the chat. All right, Wendy. Let's see. I see some responses here. Family, human and respect, humility and respect, animal rights, children, friends, community, family, my kids, healthy babies and parents, volunteering. All right. So when you think about the things that you're passionate about, if you're actually thinking about being passionate about those things on social media, let's then talk about what would be the next step. All right. So the first thing I would ask you is to pull out your phones now, because I'm going to ask you to look at your social media page. So if you look at your social media page, pick the one that you use most regularly. Right now, I'm focused primarily on IG, Facebook, or Twitter. TikTok is slightly different. So I'd ask you to pick either social media, Facebook, Twitter, or IG. Now, when you go to your page, there is a little bio about yourself, right? So when you look at the bio that describes who you are, so as an example, I'm going to go to my Twitter handle. And on my Twitter handle, the way that it describes me is the following. I am the VP of Partnership Strategy. It says Diversity Partnerships because it's a shorter version of my really super long title at Twitter. So think about what I told you first, that I had to decide, right, whether or not I'm talking about me or am I talking about my passion. Now, in this case, because I work for Twitter, I have to lead with who I am, not necessarily with my passion. In my case, fortunately, those two come together. But when you think about your social media bio, it is the description of who you are. And whether it is on your IG or whether it is on Facebook or whether it is on Twitter, your bio tells people what you stand for, or it should tell people what they should expect to find if they follow you. So what you will find if you follow me is about intersectionality, diversity, AI being artificial intelligence, serving others, dignity and respect. I am a proud member of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated. I am in the Pittsburgh community. I live with joy, and the things that give me joy are sun, biking, water or beaches, and the views equal my own. Now, the reality is everybody puts views equals my own. But if you say something as the vice president of an organization, you should know that the views equal your own, but they still also equal the views of the company. Even though we tell people that they can tweet what they want, there are still guidelines that exist in every organization about what is appropriate and inappropriate on social media. So the thing that I want you to connect when you think about getting started in social and promoting a cause is identifying your purpose on social. So the first thing is we talked a little bit about who you are and what you stand for and what your passions. But now I want you to connect that to your purpose on social. The first thing that I've highlighted here is your bios. So your bios should be consistent with that which you're going to be tweeting, posting, or talking about. Because when people decide to follow you, they will go to your bio. And if your bio just says, I care about fruit, and you're going to be tweeting about your passion about social justice, then you may not get a follow. And the way that that might happen is you might like a post, and then they might go and see who you are because you like their post. And if they see you have things that are similar and common, then in many cases, they may follow you in return. In addition to that, you may make a comment that may lead them to your bio. or you may simply retweet or repost something or share something. So it's important that if you really want to champion a cause and you're using your social media to do that, that your bio is connected to the thing that you say that you care about. All right. The second thing is your hashtags. So for me, the hashtags that you see here are I will do my part. I can tell you if you search I will do my part, you'll probably, I don't know how many people are tweeting I will do my part, but I will also tell you that if you search that I will do my part on any social, you will probably see something that has a tweet from me or a post from me or a feed from me. So in addition to connecting my bio to the passion and the things that I want to be known for or promoting on social, it's also important to use hashtags that are connected to that cause. And then the third is media. And that would be anything from video to photos, and also making sure that when you post those things, obviously that you use hashtags. Now, I would also make one note before I leave that in saying identify your purpose. You should also, before you start using a hashtag, you should also look at that hashtag to see what else is in the hashtag so that when you use it, that you're okay with being associated with all that's being said about it. Because if you're using a hashtag that is not being used in a positive way, then all of a sudden you're contributing to perhaps a negative conversation. All right. The next thing I want you to do is to think about your audience. All right. So if you are, as an example, wanting to promote social justice, representation in media, I'm looking at some of the things that you listed, pictures of families, animal rights, sports, travel, then the question is who is your audience, right? So in some cases, it might just be local. I'm talking to people in Pittsburgh, or I'm talking to people in the US, or I'm talking to people in the world. What I can tell you is that when you think about geography, you invite obviously more conversation, but you also invite significantly more opinions. Demographic, are you talking to a certain age group or generation? Are you talking to a certain ethnic group? Are you talking to a group of people who have already identified themselves perhaps in an existing group? And then I obviously identifying what platform. So this is what I say about platforms. I think that when I'm posting on Facebook, I'm talking mostly to people who I already know, people who follow me, people who I follow, and probably people who I've known through some kind of interaction in the course of my life, whether that's from school or from work or from community projects, from volunteering at the United Way. These are things that we often are ways that we make connections with humans. Now, depending on the algorithm, because quite frankly, you may have, a number of followers, you may have a number of friends, but everybody in your follower or friends list does not see the information that you post. And by the way the algorithms work, it often is people who follow you or respond to you are the ones who are most likely. You've probably seen lots of algorithm changes over the course of the years where suddenly you used to see a lot of people and now you see kind of the same people. And that's primarily because of algorithms. So when I think about Facebook, I think about promoting my cause to people who I already know. And in fact, it might be a difference between if I, for example, I'm doing a fundraiser for school, I'm selling popcorn. I might post that on Facebook. I would not likely post that on Twitter. When I'm talking to Facebook, I'm talking to people mostly that I know or are friends of people I know. When I'm talking to Twitter, I'm talking to anyone in the world who happens to see this post, which could literally be, depending on which geography you picked, depending on which demographic you picked to follow, and depending on who the community is that you have identified as your audience on Twitter, that popcorn post could end up anywhere, depending on who retweets it, right? Depending on who likes it. And sometimes a person can end up with thousands of likes, not because they have thousands of followers, but because one of their followers has thousands and thousands and thousands of followers. So it's important to pick your audience, understand the geography, whether it's local, national, or global, understand who your demographic is, and understand what platform. If you're going for people that you know because you want them to get involved with something, attend an event, you want them to participate in buying your popcorn, I'm probably going to suggest Facebook. If you're thinking about just posting pictures of yourself or something that you're passionate about, dogs or family, I would say IG, because IG doesn't give you a whole lot of space to tell a whole story. And in fact, not only that, but in many cases, people look at the picture and give you a like based on the image, not based on the information that you have selected next to it. And when you post on Twitter, because you have a limited character count, you literally cannot tell the whole story. So you get to tell an abbreviated story, but you're talking to the world. So talking to the world, Twitter, talking about yourself, IG, and talking to your family, friends, and friends of their friends, Facebook. All right. So the next thing that we would think about is we have our audience, we figured out our purpose, we figured out our audience and who we're going for, and now we want to identify people who we want to engage in a dialogue with. So when I think about this, I think about, of course, our own platform, Twitter. So I would start on Twitter and I would think about topics. I would go into the search category, which is the little feature on the bottom. If you have Twitter as an account, there is a little magnifying glass. And if you select search, you can pick, let's just say people want to follow dogs or sports or volunteerism. And then you can like other organizations and other people who are actually caring about the same concerns. And this is how we actually then get in dialogue about these various topics. In addition to that, although I would say on IG, you're probably going to need to use a hashtag, and then you can see who else is talking about this. And then on Facebook, a similar thing, hashtags and or thinking about joining groups and pages that have a similar conversation. All right, so groups and pages. Now, if you are trying to now promote the actual issue, you are trying to promote the event, this is the place that I would start. On Twitter, there's a thing called list. And if you are on Twitter, I would open up my phone and I would click on your own biography. So what you'll see is something that says Candi, the number of followers, profile, and then you say list. And I can also always come back, Wendy, or anybody at the United Way, or anybody who's hearing my voice. If you'd like to know more specifically about a Twitter training, we could do that at another time. But a list is actually a way to create a separate, entirely separate feed of only people who you want to follow. So as an example, if I wanted to only follow people who cared about sports or tweeting about sports or sports teams, or for that matter, Pittsburgh sports, I could literally create a list on Twitter that only has the Pirates, the Penguins, and the Steelers. And perhaps I can go only to that feed. And by the way, I won't see anything else if I'm on that feed. I will only see things that are related to Pittsburgh sports. In the same way, you can do the same thing for your like or passion for dogs, or advocacy for women, or advocacy for girls, or advocacy for equality or civil rights. You can literally create a list of just the people who talk about those things. Now, the way that you're going to find that out is to go to their bios. And in their bios, it'll say, I care about family or dogs or volunteerism. And then you can create a list. And then that way you can get involved in the dialogue much more quickly than just the whole entire list of things that people can tweet about in the world, which literally, in many cases, sometimes take people away from wanting to use Twitter because it's a lot of information. But list is an incredible way for you to talk to, or just to follow or see a feed that is specifically for people who have a similar interest. Many people use groups on Facebook, pages on Facebook, and these are also ways that you can build a connection with people and have dialogues with people to start a conversation. So when you're starting this conversation, obviously about whatever your cause is, whatever you're promoting, many people use videos. This is where TikTok comes in. You can use TikTok videos clearly on other social, all the three that I've been talking about, IG, Facebook, and Twitter. You can also do a poll, like to get a person's opinion and post data. Now, many of you probably already know some of these things, but when you put them all together, you then get to the place where you're actually now posting. You've identified what you're going to talk about, what your purpose is, distinguishing whether you're posting about yourself and your role, in the voice of your role, or whether you're just posting about your passion. You've also had some conversation, hopefully with yourself, about what you're willing to engage in with dignity and respect, and how you're going to engage with people who have similar and different opinions. And now I've given you a couple of ideas of how to get started. So this is the place where I am going to pause and give you sort of my last thoughts, and then we'll open it up for a conversation. Intent does not equal impact. I may have intended to say one thing. The way it was received has an impact on a group of people or a person that I did not intend. And even though I say I'm sorry, even though I delete the tweet, the post, it doesn't mean that the impact isn't felt by the human that felt it or the community that felt it. And this is probably the thing, if you take anything away, that I want you to remember. Intent does not equal impact. You cannot undo simply by saying, I'm sorry, I didn't mean that. So I'm going to go back to the beginning when I said, if you don't have friends who have different perspectives from you, you need to make some new friends, right? Because in order to understand similar and difference, you have to be committed to the and. And what I said to you was that you don't necessarily have to agree with it. You don't have to necessarily change your mind about what you're going to say, what you're going to post, and what you're going to stand for. But you're going to ask for different perspectives, similar and different perspectives, so that you understand when you are taking an action that is about to go out into the universe, that you were informed about the consequences or how other people might feel. If you don't take that step and you post or you tweet with just your own singular opinion, then this conversation actually can come back to you in the form of cancel culture. Cancel culture is very real. And not only is cancel culture real, but cancel culture is unforgiving. In the dictionary, it is described as dismissing something or someone to reject an individual and or idea. It reveals a very big problem in our culture, and cancel culture exists currently. And it does not give people a chance to learn from and or apologize for their wrongdoings. Now, I can give you several examples. However, all it takes is one, and that one cannot be easily erased. It could be something you tweeted about many years ago, you posted many years ago. And by the way, if you're a teenager listening to this, it's the thing that will catch up with you, not necessarily today. Although if you have friends, they will actually see it today. And sometimes people think because it's on Snap and it's come and it's posted and it's gone, that nobody knows. I can tell you a situation that happened recently with my niece that I won't elaborate on, but it was something that was posted and it wasn't intended for my niece, but my niece saw it. And it was about Black people, and it wasn't very favorable. And I have to say that the person, of course, cried and said, I'm sorry, I didn't mean it. But the reality is you can't undo it. And you can't say I'm sorry for everything and make things go back to the way things were. Cancel culture is real. So be extremely mindful that intent does not equal impact. And once it is posted, it is in the world, even if you pull it right down. All it takes is one person to see it. So social media is almost like forever for that purpose. Like it almost doesn't ever go away. And unlike the days of your parents where it was a photograph and only the photograph told the story, or the days where it is on a camera, literally the life today is lived out loud and everybody gets to see it. So what I'd ask you just to think about in summary is this: decide who you're posting as. The best advice I ever got from Dean Olga Welch, formerly of Duquesne University, was, Candi, you have to decide, are you responding in the role that you were hired to do, and whether that's the role of diversity and inclusion, or whether that is the role of the founder of Dignity and Respect, or are you responding as Candi? And I have to say, sometimes those things, I have to make a choice. Who am I responding as? Because sometimes Candi is very hurt by the things she sees happening in the world. Sometimes Candi has a very strong opinion about what's happening in the world. And Candi has to sit with that. And the thing that I will give you is a tool that I use called STOP. S-T-O-P. Stop. Like, stop, do not take action immediately. Think about what you really want to say, observe the situation, and then pause before proceeding. We have all posted in frustration. We have all sent an email in frustration. And in many cases, if it hasn't happened to you yet, it will happen to you once in your life that you wish that you could take back. So my last feedback for you is, remember, social media is almost like forever. So stop, think, observe, and pause before you proceed. So those are my words. That's what I have to share with you today. I thank you for joining, and I am here now for some Q&A.
Great. Thank you so much, Candi. The first question from our audience is, what if, especially as a youth in this group, any teens that are listening, what do you do if you do post something that you then immediately regret, or a few hours later, you know, if you don't stop and you ask it again, what do you do? What are the right steps?
Well, I think the first thing you should do, obviously, if you posted it, is to pull it down. But the second thing that I would do is I would journal what my feeling is right now, and why I pulled it down, so that in the day that it comes back to you, like at some point you get to an age where you don't even remember. I don't even remember that post. I don't even remember what I was thinking or feeling. And so even if in that journal is nothing you ever share, and whatever the reason is that you said it at that time won't be one that you remember, you want to remember why you said it and did it, so that if you ever have to defend it, that you have your own personal reflection, other than to say, I'm sorry, I don't even remember it.
Great. Thank you so much. Next question. If someone posts something on social media that upsets or offends you, how do you know whether or how to engage without being counterproductive?
So I think you have to decide, quite frankly, I get this question sadly a lot. And you could imagine, as strongly as I feel about diversity and inclusion, there are many days where I have a lot to say. I think that I would ask you to even think about what you say your purpose is. And for me, I have defined one of mine as dignity and respect. And the thing is if you pull out your phones like right now, so if you pull out your phones right now and look at, like, just pull out your phones and look at like the last 4 or 5 posts that you have, right? And so I don't care which platform, you can use Facebook, social media, IG or Twitter. So pull out your phones and look at the last 5 posts that you have. And then think about what you said your passion was in the earlier part of this conversation. This is how, in many cases, I think it's important and what to think about. Because what's in your feed should be consistent with who you say you are and what your passion is. And so at the point that this dialogue is going to take you away from the thing that you say you are, right? Because think about it, your social media is building an external presence and reputation. It's stacking literally information about who you are. And so when you decide to engage in that conversation, then you should decide whether or not, right, this is the thing that you want in your stack of information that defines who you are, right? So for me, the thing that I go back to, and I look at my own feed and it says dignity and respect, I will do my part. And so I have to decide, is my response going to be consistent with who I say I am, or is my response going to take me away from building up that as a consistent sort of message about what I stand for, what my passion is? So when you look at your last 5 posts, right, and whether they're on whatever platform, I would ask you to do that before you respond, right? Think about, like, here's my bio. My bio says, I will do my part, serve others, dignity and respect. If I respond to this, does it support what my bio says, or does it contradict that? Because the reality is we can't solve every problem in the world, but there are going to be times when you want to lean in. And when you lean in, it should be consistent with the things that you say you're passionate about. That's not a good thing if you have a family. I am an advocate and supporter of animals, so I don't believe or support that opinion. And the reality is that I would not ever get into the constant response. So I would, if you feel strongly, respond the first time, consistently with what you say in your bio. And then the second thing that I would say is, if that person is just there to have a debate, that's probably not the dialogue that's going to change their opinion.
Great, thank you so much. Next question. Is there a way to challenge racism in post, or is there no hope to have meaningful conversation on social media?
I think the world is hypersensitive in this moment. This is probably a conversation that's worthy of a longer response, a question that's worthy of a longer response. What I will tell you is, I believe that there are extreme opinions on every side in this moment. And when people are in extreme opinions, they can't hear you the same way. One of the things that I know for sure is that what has happened is I've watched people in workplaces, in communities, retreat to people who are most like them to feel a little safer. And quite frankly, I think that people need time to heal before you should lead in a conversation that perhaps you're not an expert in, you just have an opinion on.
Great, thank you. Let's see, the next question. This is from an organizational perspective. Is there a one-pager that you would recommend on suggested platforms per topic generally? I'm not 100% sure if that question, I'm making sense of that. Along with this, how frequently should organizations be posted? Should organizations be posting?
Yeah, I think it depends on what you're trying to accomplish. So let's just say you were trying to invite someone to the United Way's talk this morning. I would say a target audience on Facebook is probably a little different than just one post on Twitter. One post on Facebook is likely to get to the people who you know, whereas one tweet on Twitter might get lost because literally Twitter is taking millions of tweets literally a minute. And so if I'm not there at the moment that the United Way post about an event, when I go 5 hours later, it will be lost. So Twitter is not just about tweeting, it's also about dialogue and conversation and ensuring that you tag other people so that they can retweet it. Because on Twitter, you're trying to keep the conversation going so that other people can be involved in the conversation. On Facebook, you can have a post, and that post, literally people aren't posting at the frequency of Twitter. On IG, quite frankly, it would just be an image. It will go to your target audience. And of course, if you're doing ads, of course, you can target any of these groups. But I would say for us, particularly for an event, unless you have a major following, I would say IG and Facebook are probably better for those. If you're on Twitter, let's just say you are trying to, you're in the middle of this event, as an example, and we were having a chat. I would say Twitter is good for that, because Twitter is good for all of us to say at the same time that we're doing this, we would like you to tweet at United Way. And we'd like you to tweet at, Wendy or at Candi. By the way, my handle is Candi on Twitter. And if you're on Twitter, right, you don't have to do this. I'm not asking you to tweet about that. So what I'm saying is that if you were in the middle of an event, then that dialogue might start to trend, depending on obviously the size of the audience, the geography, the time of the day. And having a live conversation while this is happening then allows the conversation to go beyond just now. But other people who aren't here might join in if it's like IG or if it's a Clubhouse conversation. The Clubhouse, by the way, is a new platform, so I haven't talked that much about that, but we can come back to that if anybody's interested. But what I would say is the thing about Twitter is you want to be having a conversation with people. So I would say including hashtags, live events, events that are happening where other people are speaking, and then you could tag them so that they can retweet it. There are other ways that I would say I would use Twitter versus Facebook.
Thank you. Next question, when deciding who you are posting as, do you have a quote self Twitter profile and a separate quote role profile? And if so, do they tend to overlap?
Yeah, so I only have one Twitter account where I post regularly. I do have, other organizations that I support that I also tweet as those organizations. But as Candi, I'm only using my current Twitter profile. And that will be the same one. If I weren't at Twitter, I would just take that description of my job off and I would still use the same thing. So I created my profile for what I believe in. And so the only thing that would change if I went to work for another organization is that first part. I will always stand for diversity and inclusion. I will always support the idea of intersectionality. I am concerned about bias in AI, which is the next big diversity issue that not enough people are talking about. And so for me, my bio is who I am. Twitter is just where I work. But that's not the case for everybody. If you're like the president of a school, you may not be able to, right? Tweet as yourself. It ultimately, I think, depends on how comfortable you are with your passions aligning to your role. And sometimes people just have an account, whether it's on Facebook. I saw somebody in here saying they had multiple accounts. Oftentimes you have multiple accounts because one of them doesn't allow you to have the freedom of speech that you would prefer.
Thank you so much, Candi, and thank you to Twitter for allowing your participation today as well. You have given us so much to think about, and I would just highlight 3 key takeaways from listening to you this morning. I think first, the alignment of who you are and what you say, how important that is, and that our differences should inform our positions and that it doesn't have to change our mind. And approaching all of this through the lens of dignity and respect of how important that is. So, in listening to what you had to say this morning, I thought those were 3 really important takeaways for anyone using social media to be thinking about as we try to use it for social good. And in in today's theme of gathering around Martin Luther King Day, I just wanted to mention that in one of his sermons entitled "Three Dimensions of a Complete Life," Dr. King proclaimed that life's most important and persistent, urgent question is, what are we doing for others? What are we doing for others? And the urgency of that question has never been greater than it is today in this moment in history. And you're doing that by participating in a conversation like this, being a part of this discussion and thinking about how we can use social media for good in our lives, in our families, and in our communities. So a special thank you to Candi for providing us with this thought-provoking discussion and some tools to make this positive change, and that we can use them in our work and in our families and as young people thinking about how they engage in social media. So thank you all for being a part of United Way's Martin Luther King Volunteer Day. We hope you found a lot of thought-provoking discussion in the session today. And we ask that you be on the lookout for future United Way programs that we'll be doing virtually, as well as hopefully in person again sometime soon, hopefully in 2021. And on behalf of our discussion leader, Candi Castleberry, and the United Way of Southwestern Pennsylvania, want to wish you and your family a happy Martin Luther King Day, and thank you for joining us. Goodbye, all.